On July 24, 2025, the Antonov An-24, a Soviet-era aircraft, disappeared from radar during its final approach to Tinda. In an instant, the world lost contact with a plane that had, for decades, been a stalwart of regional travel in Russia's Far East. The Antonov An-24 was no stranger to the skies. Designed and built in the 1970s, this twin-engine turboprop aircraft had flown countless missions, connecting remote communities with the larger world. But on this fateful day, something went horribly wrong. As the aircraft approached the Tinda airport, low visibility and deteriorating weather conditions combined with the aircraft's aging components created an almost insurmountable challenge. Inside the plane, 42 passengers, including 5 children, along with 6 crew members, trusted their pilots to guide them safely to the ground. What they didn't know was that this would be the final flight for all aboard. Minutes later, as the plane descended into the low-hanging clouds, it vanished from radar, and eerie silence followed. Search teams later discovered the wreckage, scattered across the dense, unforgiving landscape. The twisted remnants of the Antonov An-24 lay smoldering in the wilderness, a haunting reminder of how quickly life can be lost in the unforgiving sky. What caused this tragedy? How did an aircraft, once a reliable lifeline in the vastness of Russia, meet such a grim end? And what does this reveal about aviation safety in the 21st century? As we delve deeper into the investigation, the answers may surprise you. The Antonov An-24, first introduced in 1969, was built to serve a very specific purpose: to connect the remote corners of the Soviet Union. With its sturdy, rugged design, it was well suited to operate in the harsh conditions of Siberia and other far-flung regions where modern infrastructure was sparse. A symbol of Soviet engineering, the An-24 was reliable, capable, and long-lasting, a true workhorse in the skies. With its twin turboprop engines and a range of 1,000 miles, the An-24 was a small, yet powerful aircraft. It was capable of carrying up to 52 passengers or cargo, and it often operated on short regional routes that required a plane with both power and flexibility. Its turboprop engines, while not as fast as jet engines, were perfectly suited to these domestic flights, offering reliability over long distances at moderate speeds. For decades, the An-24 served not only as a commercial aircraft, but also as a vital link between isolated Soviet cities. Its reputation as a reliable and durable aircraft made it an indispensable part of the Soviet air fleet, and even after the fall of the USSR, the plane continued to serve across former Soviet states, including Russia. It was a lifeline for those living in some of the most remote and unforgiving parts of the world. But age catches up to all things, and the Antonov An-24 was no exception. As the years passed, the once innovative design began to show its limitations. With each passing decade, its engines aged, its parts became harder to replace, and its safety record, while generally sound, started to raise questions. Still, despite these growing concerns, the aircraft continued to operate, flying missions on short routes across some of the most dangerous terrain in the world. As we look at this plane's legacy, we must ask, how could an aircraft that had once been so reliable and vital for decades now find itself at the center of a tragedy? What went wrong? And how could such an aging plane remain in operation despite the inherent risks? July 24th, 2025, began like any other day for the crew and passengers aboard Antonov An-24. The plane, under the operation of Angara Airlines, took off from Blagoveshchensk, bound for Tinda, a small but crucial stop in Russia's remote Far East. The flight was supposed to be a short one, just under 100 miles, but it would become a flight that would never reach its destination. As the aircraft approached Tinda, the weather began to deteriorate. A thick fog settled over the area, obscuring visibility to dangerous levels. In this remote region, airports like Tinda aren't equipped with the latest, most advanced landing technology, and pilots rely heavily on their skills, their training, and their experience. But even the most skilled pilots face limitations in extreme conditions like these. The pilots of the An-24, who had flown this route countless times before, began the approach for a landing, one that would ultimately be their last. As they descended into the dense cloud cover, the aircraft's systems began to falter. Visibility was near zero, and the challenge of navigating this aging plane under these conditions was daunting. But the crew pushed forward, relying on their instruments to guide them safely. Just moments before the plane was supposed to touch down, disaster struck. The aircraft vanished from radar, and the crew's final moments were lost in the static of the radio transmissions. A tense silence followed. On the ground, no one knew what had happened. Hours later, the wreckage of the Antonov An-24 was discovered in the forest, a twisted heap of metal in the vast wilderness of the Amur region. It was clear that no one had survived. What had gone wrong during this fateful approach? How had a routine flight turned into one of the deadliest aviation disasters in recent memory? The answer lay buried in the wreckage, and it would take an investigation to reveal the truth. As the news of the crash spread, shock rippled across Russia and beyond. In the far-flung Amur region, where the crash occurred, local authorities and emergency responders raced against the clock to reach the wreckage. It wasn't until hours later that the true extent of the tragedy became clear. All 48 people aboard the Antonov An-24 had perished, including 42 passengers and 6 crew members. The victims, including 5 young children, were caught in an unforgiving environment, an isolated wilderness where help was far too distant. Across Russia, the nation mourned. The families of the victims were left to process the devastating loss of loved ones, and many questions began to flood the airwaves. How could something like this happen? What went wrong? The world was left grasping for answers. As the wreckage of the Antonov An-24 lay scattered in the dense forest, a stark and haunting reminder of the tragic events that had unfolded. Russian President Vladimir Putin immediately expressed his condolences, offering heartfelt messages of sympathy to the families of the victims. In his address, he declared a national period of mourning, and local authorities in the Amur region followed suit by announcing a 3-day mourning period for the victims. The emotional toll of this tragedy was felt across the nation, but for the families of the victims, the loss was unimaginable. The silence of that fateful day was now filled with grief. International reactions soon followed. China, which had one of its own citizens on the plane, expressed its deepest sympathies. Chinese President Xi Jinping also sent a message of condolences, highlighting the global impact of the crash. This wasn't just a national tragedy. It was an international one, reverberating across borders and nations. But as the world grieved, the most pressing question remained: what had caused this crash? What lessons could be learned from this tragedy to ensure that no one else would have to suffer such a loss? The investigation into the Antonov An-24 crash was just beginning, and its findings would undoubtedly shape the future of aviation safety for years to come. In the aftermath of the tragic crash, the Russian government launched a thorough investigation into what had gone wrong. The wreckage of the Antonov An-24 was meticulously examined, and all signs pointed to a combination of factors that led to the disaster. But the investigation soon uncovered something far more troubling: systemic safety violations within Angara Airlines, the carrier operating the doomed flight. One of the first things that emerged was the airline's lack of adherence to modern aviation safety protocols. In the weeks leading up to the crash, Russian transport safety inspectors had conducted routine checks on Angara Airlines. Their findings were alarming. The airline had violated several key regulations, including the use of unqualified personnel for critical maintenance tasks and the failure to maintain adequate testing equipment for the aircraft. These lapses in safety measures had led to the grounding of several of Angara's planes and the suspension of key technical staff. The Antonov An-24 itself had passed its most recent technical inspection, but the fact that such violations were occurring within the airline raised serious questions. Had the maintenance of this aging aircraft been compromised by these systemic issues? Had corners been cut in ways that ultimately compromised the safety of the plane and its passengers? Further scrutiny revealed that the An-24, despite its long history of service, was no longer the reliable workhorse it once had been. The aircraft was decades old, with its engines and parts increasingly difficult to replace. In fact, it was clear that the airline had struggled to keep the aircraft in peak operational condition. While the An-24 had once been considered a dependable plane, its age had finally caught up with it. As investigators pieced together the events of that fateful day, they also discovered that the flight crew, while experienced, had been put under immense pressure to complete a flight in less than ideal conditions. In a region where weather could turn violent without warning and where advanced aviation technology was scarce, this pressure created a dangerous scenario. The investigation into Angara Airlines and into the factors that led to the crash was far from over. But what had started as an investigation into mechanical failures soon revealed a larger, more complex issue, a culture of oversight that had allowed safety to be compromised at every level. The tragedy of the Antonov An-24 crash raised more than just questions about this one aircraft. It illuminated a much broader issue facing Russian aviation: the reliance on aging aircraft. Despite the advancements in global aviation technology, Russia continues to operate fleets of Soviet-era planes like the An-24, many of which are well past their prime. The question that looms large is, why does a country with such strategic geopolitical significance still rely on these outdated machines? One answer lies in the economics of aviation in Russia. The country has faced severe restrictions due to Western sanctions, limiting access to modern aircraft parts and technology. The cost of maintaining or upgrading an entire fleet of modern aircraft is prohibitive, especially in a nation where vast regions remain poorly connected by modern infrastructure. For many regional carriers, particularly in the vast stretches of Siberia and the Far East, the An-24 and other Soviet-era models have become the only viable options, despite their aging systems and increasingly difficult to replace parts. The Antonov An-24, which had originally been designed as a reliable, short-haul passenger plane, was well suited for its environment, until the limitations of time and technology began to take their toll. The engines, once revolutionary, had become inefficient. The parts, once readily available, were now hard to source. Yet, these planes continued to serve the vast regions of Russia, flying in and out of isolated airstrips with minimal upgrades and often relying on makeshift repairs. However, the Russian government is aware of the need for modernization. Plans for replacing these aging planes with newer, more efficient models, like the domestically produced Latuga aircraft, are in the works. Yet, the transition will not be swift. The Latuga, a new regional aircraft designed to replace older Soviet-era models, is still in the early stages of production and won't be ready for widespread deployment until at least 2027. For now, the aging fleet remains in operation, and tragedies like the An-24 crash highlight the risks of waiting too long to embrace modern aviation. As Russia continues to wrestle with this dilemma, the question remains: can it modernize its fleet in time to prevent further disasters? Or will it continue to rely on planes that should have been grounded years ago? The future of Russian aviation hinges on these critical decisions. The Antonov An-24 crash was a tragic reminder of the risks that still exist in aviation, even in the 21st century. But it also serves as a stark catalyst for change, urging the aviation industry worldwide to reflect on its safety protocols and the continued use of aging aircraft. The crash highlighted not just the technical issues with the An-24, but also the broader challenges facing aviation safety, especially in regions where financial and logistical constraints limit the adoption of modern technologies. One of the key lessons learned from this tragedy is the critical importance of maintenance and oversight in ensuring the safety of aircraft, particularly older models. The investigation revealed that systemic lapses in maintenance and safety protocols within Angara Airlines contributed directly to the crash. These lapses, combined with the inherent risks of flying an aging aircraft in harsh conditions, underscore the need for rigorous, ongoing inspections and upgrades to keep planes safe and operational. Aviation safety today demands more than just maintaining aircraft. It requires the adoption of cutting-edge technology and adherence to global safety standards. With the advent of digital systems like FADEC, full-authority digital engine control, and digital twins, sophisticated simulations that replicate the performance of an aircraft in real time, the potential for predicting failures before they occur has never been greater. But the tragedy in the Amur region shows that even these technologies can't replace the fundamental need for vigilant oversight and modern infrastructure. This crash also serves as a reminder of the economic and geopolitical challenges that influence aviation safety. In Russia's case, sanctions and financial restrictions have stunted the growth of the country's aviation sector, pushing it to rely on outdated technology. But Russia is not alone. Many countries continue to operate aging fleets due to economic or political reasons. The need for international collaboration to overcome these challenges has never been more pressing. Safety cannot be compromised by financial constraints. As we look to the future, the lessons from the Antonov An-24 crash must inform the path forward. The world must work together to ensure that no more tragedies are allowed to occur simply because older aircraft were allowed to fly beyond their safe lifespan. The aviation industry's commitment to safety must be unwavering, regardless of the challenges. The tragic crash of the Antonov An-24 in the Amur region has left an indelible mark on Russia and the global aviation community. The lives lost in that remote wilderness are a sobering reminder of the risks that still persist in aviation, particularly when outdated technology meets the harsh realities of modern travel. As we reflect on this disaster, we must honor the victims and their families, whose lives were tragically cut short. The Antonov An-24, once a symbol of Soviet-era ingenuity, now serves as a cautionary tale of what happens when the past is allowed to linger too long in the skies. Its legacy, however, is not just one of failure, it is a call to action. The future of aviation depends on the lessons we learn from events like this, the advances we make in technology, and the commitment to safety that must be the foundation of every flight. As we move forward, we must remember that aviation safety is not just about cutting-edge technology. It's about constant vigilance, sound regulations, and, most importantly, the preservation of human life. The legacy of this tragedy and the lives lost must not be forgotten. Let this be the turning point where we commit to a future where no one has to experience the same heartbreak.